March 16th, 2020, a Monday. Target opens at 8 a.m. in suburban Minneapolis. By 8:03, the toilet paper aisle is empty. By 8:07, hand sanitizer is gone. By 8:12, there's a fist fight over the last bag of rice. But here's what didn't sell out that morning. Financial advice books, investment guides, anything that might actually help people understand what was happening to their money. Instead, they bought toilet paper. And that's not stupidity, that's psychology. That's survival instinct overriding rational thought. That's what happens when panic spreads faster than information. Because when people feel the ground shifting beneath them economically, they don't run towards solutions, they run towards symbols of control, tangible things, objects that say, "I prepared, I'm safe, I won't be the one caught without." This pattern repeats, every crash, every crisis, every financial panic going back centuries. The items change, the psychology doesn't.
Quick thing before we get into this. If you want to understand the actual mechanisms behind financial panic instead of just experiencing it next time, subscribe now. This channel breaks down the uncomfortable.
All right, let's go. We're going to walk through 7 things people rush to buy during moments of economic terror. Not just what they bought, but why it made sense to them in that moment. Why their brains, flooded with cortisol and cable news, pointed them toward these specific items. And here's what makes this worth your time right now. We're living in an era where financial panic is no longer rare. It's not some once-in-a-generation event your grandparents warned you about. We've had multiple moments in the last 5 years alone where markets convulsed, currencies wobbled, and regular people started Googling how to prepare for economic collapse at 2 a.m. 2020, pandemic lockdowns. 2022, inflation hits 9.1%. 2023, banking crisis. Each time, the same pattern. Each time, store shelves empty in the same predictable order. Which means you need to understand the mechanism, not so you can join the stampede next time, but so you can recognize when it's happening, why it's happening, and what it actually means for your financial security versus what it feels like it means. Because panic buying isn't about the items, it's about the fear behind them. And that fear is almost always pricing in a different disaster than the one that's actually coming. Let's start with the obvious one, gold. Every financial crisis, without fail, gold bugs emerge from the woodwork like cicadas. Suddenly your uncle who works in insurance is texting you about gold ETFs. Your coworkers watching YouTube videos about gold to silver ratios. The guy at the gym wants to talk about sound money. And gold prices spike. In 2008, gold went from $800 an ounce in October to $1,900 by September 2011. That's 138% in less than 3 years. When COVID hit in March 2020, gold jumped from $1,500 to over $2,000 in 5 months. Here's what people think they're buying: protection, a hedge against currency collapse, something that holds value when paper money doesn't. Here's what they're actually buying: a 5,000-year-old consensus hallucination. Gold has no industrial utility that justifies its price. It doesn't produce cash flow. It doesn't pay dividends. You can't eat it. You can't burn it for heat. Its value exists entirely because humans collectively agreed somewhere around 3000 BC that shiny yellow rocks matter. And that agreement has held, which is actually remarkable, but it's still just an agreement. During actual collapse scenarios, gold performs weirdly. Weimar Germany, 1923, hyperinflation destroyed the currency, but most Germans couldn't eat their gold. They needed food, which meant trading gold for increasingly absurd amounts of bread. Venezuela, 2016 to 2020, gold helped the wealthy exit. For everyone else, it was functionally useless because no local merchants accepted it. The uncomfortable truth is gold works brilliantly if civilization wobbles but doesn't fall, if the system is stressed but still functioning, if you can eventually convert it back to currency at a higher rate. But if you're buying gold because you genuinely believe society is collapsing, you're buying the wrong asset. You should be buying ammunition and farmland. Most people buying gold during financial panics aren't preppers, though. They're middle-class professionals who feel control slipping. Gold gives them something to do, an action step, a hedge that feels ancient and therefore wise. It's productive anxiety, and sometimes, honestly, it works out fine, just not for the reasons they think. 2008 financial crisis, canned food sales jumped 18% in 6 weeks. 2020 pandemic, increase of 56% year over year. 2022 inflation panic, another spike, this time driven by people stocking up before prices rise further. This one makes intuitive sense. Food is survival. If you believe disruption is coming, whether it's supply chain collapse or your personal inability to afford groceries next month, stocking up feels rational. And it is rational, right up until the point where it creates the very shortage it was trying to avoid. Here's the mechanism. It's called demand shock. In normal times, people buy food on a just-in-time basis. You go to the store when you're running low. Grocery stores stock shelves based on predictable demand patterns. The entire supply chain is optimized for smooth, consistent flow. Then panic hits. Suddenly, everyone who normally buys 3 cans of beans a month tries to buy 30. Demand spikes 1,000% overnight. Stores can't restock fast enough. Shelves empty, which makes more people panic, which creates more demand. Feedback loop. The absurd part, there was never actually a shortage. In 2020, American food production didn't drop. The food existed. It just wasn't in the right location at the right time because consumer behavior broke the logistics model. But here's where it gets psychologically interesting. People who stockpiled food during these panics often report feeling calmer afterward, even if they never touched most of what they bought, even if the crisis resolved and their pantry full of Campbell's soup just sat there for 2 years. The act of preparation reduced anxiety. That has real value, even if the preparation was technically unnecessary. There's a darker edge, though. Stockpiling food assumes you have capital to deploy. It assumes you have storage space. It's a middle-class panic move. The people who most needed food security during these crises couldn't afford to buy 6 months of groceries at once. So panic buying becomes wealth sorting, the prepared versus the caught short, which deepens inequality in exactly the moments when society needs resilience most. Let's talk about the elephant in the American room. March 2020, FBI background checks for firearm purchases hit 3.7 million. That's a single month. Previous record was 2.7 million. By the end of 2020, Americans had purchased roughly 23 million guns. That's more than the population of Australia. 2008, similar spike. 9/11, massive spike. Every crisis, same pattern. And it's not just guns. Ammunition became nearly impossible to find. Prices for 9mm rounds went from 20 cents per round in 2019 to 70 cents per round in 2021. Some calibers tripled. Shortages lasted for years. The stated reason, self-defense. People see chaos coming and want to protect their families and property. The actual psychology is more layered. Guns represent the ultimate opt-out of social cooperation. They say, if the system fails, I don't need the system. I have the ability to enforce my own security. That's a seductive narrative during financial crises, which are fundamentally about failing trust. You don't trust the bank to hold your money. You don't trust the government to maintain order. You don't trust your neighbors to stay civil if things get worse. A gun is a declaration of self-reliance, which feels powerful when everything else feels uncertain. But here's the math that doesn't get discussed much. The scenarios where personal firearms actually provide meaningful security during economic collapse are vanishingly rare. You're not defending your home from roving gangs in most financial crises. You're worried about losing your job, about inflation eating your savings, about retirement accounts dropping 40%. A gun doesn't solve those problems. It solves a different, more cinematic version of collapse that mostly exists in movies. Yet the demand persists. Why? Because fear is contagious and self-reinforcing. If your neighbor buys a gun because they're worried about social breakdown, you might buy a gun because now you're worried about your armed neighbor. There's an arms race logic to it, which, ironically, makes everyone less safe while everyone feels more prepared. The financial angle is wild. During the 2020 panic, people spent an estimated $10 billion on firearms and ammunition. That's $10 billion not going into emergency savings, retirement accounts, or paying down debt. Panic buying shifts capital from productive to protective assets, from tools that build future security to tools that address present fear. Sometimes that trade makes sense. Often it's just expensive anxiety management. Now we get weird, because cryptocurrency is both the newest item on this list and somehow the most historically consistent in terms of panic psychology. 2020, Bitcoin went from $5,000 in March to $29,000 by December. 2022, different kind of panic, collapse instead of surge, but same psychological pattern of people fleeing toward or away from crypto